Okay, next on the agenda as we reconvene, do I have to, that's all I have to say to reconvene, right? We're back in session. Is Elizabeth Hennessy from William Blair, who serves as, do we call you bond counsel? I don't know what we call you. Bond counsel to the district, and has given some thought to some financing options for the project, and will walk us through it.
Thanks, Jeff. Let me first say that I think my financing options might be a bit inadequate for all of the options you're considering, but
that's why there's a last note at the end of the presentation that I asked you.
That's why it helps us.
but we do have a per $5 million increase, so you can do some multiplication as you think about these different options. Okay, so let's just start. First of all, the market is still fabulous. This week we've had Treasury bond rates go down even further, given global uncertainty. So very good time to be in the market for bonds. This graph shows a 5-year history of the 20-year AAA Municipal Market Data Index and the 10-year Municipal Market Data Index. The next page looks at the municipal yield curve, and the green line is where we are today. The blue line is our all-time low, which happened in the 2012. So we're very close to that. And this graph tells us that the very lowest interest rates are the very short-term ones in years 1, 2, and 3, as you can see. And then the rates go up through 10, 12 years, and then flatten out at the long end of the yield curve. The district has very little outstanding debt, as you see on page 3. You've got the 2009 limited tax school bonds, which refunded a portion of the 98 bonds for savings, and then the 2005 limited tax school bonds, which was for renovations in 2005. The shaded area of the 2005 bonds are callable prior to maturity, coming up December 1, 2015, so that may be an opportunity to save a small amount of money. If we go to the next page, though, the district has, over the last 3 years, chosen to abate its debt service payments. So it's used its operating funds, transferred it to the debt service fund, allowing an abatement of the bond and interest portion of the tax levy. So the district has used about $2.5 million of its own money of its operating fund money to pay off debt. So when we look across to the right on the tax rate for debt service, in the past it has been about 13 cents, but it's been 0 the past 3 years as a result of the district using its operating funds to pay debt service. So the final maturity on the outstanding bonds is in levy year 2016, the final maturity December 1, 2017. So very little debt outstanding. So I separated this presentation into non-referendum and referendum options. But let's start with the operating budget, simply because some of these options do look at using some of your operating fund cash towards the cost of construction. So this is your fiscal year 2015 budget for the operating funds. And the operating funds we consider the education fund, the operation and maintenance fund, and the working cash fund. So for fiscal year 2015, total revenues in the operating funds are about $65.4 million, and total expenditures about $73.6 million, bringing the fund balance from $114.6 million down to $98.6 million, or 134% of the annual operating expenditures. Okay. So when you issue non-referendum bonds, you can do so for 3 purposes. Working cash, that's the most flexible type of non-referendum bond. It can be used for capital projects or operations if the bonds are taxable. Life safety bonds, the life safety projects must be approved by the Cook County Regional Office as well as the State Board of Education prior to issue those bonds. And funding bonds can be used to pay any debt obligation or claim against the district. So for example, if the district issued some sort of lease certificates to build a facility, you could use funding bonds to repay that obligation through the debt service extension base. And let me just talk a minute about the debt service extension base. It's part of the tax limitation law. Okay, so you know the property tax cap, it limits the district's operating levy to CPI. The debt service extension base is also part of the tax limitation law and came to be in 1994 and said that whatever principal and interest the district is paying on its outstanding bonds in 1994, it can continue to levy that amount to pay principal and interest on these three types of non-referendum bonds: working cash, life safety, and funding bonds. However, the district does have some authorization processes for working cash bonds and funding bonds that include what we call a petition period, where the district would publish a notification of the issuance of bonds in the local newspaper, starting a 30-day petition period. And if within 30 days, 10% of the registered voters submitted a petition to the district, that would force the issue to go to referendum. Each one of these types of bond issues also requires a public hearing. Okay? So if we go to the next page, the district's debt service extension base is about $2.6 million. So in 1994, that amount was closer to $2.4 million, but in 2009, the tax cap law was amended, and CPI is applied to that amount. So right now, for the 2014 levy year, your debt service extension base is $2.6 million. We've assumed a CPI of about 1.5% going forward. And if you look at, I'm on the fourth column from the left, you can see how that debt service extension base grows over time, from 2.6 million right now up to 3.5 million. Under Illinois law, you can issue non-referendum bonds with a maximum repayment of 20 years. So if we were to leverage that entire stream of the debt service extension base for 20 years, the maximum limited bonds you could issue would be about 39.3 million. Okay, so this you should consider your maximum non-referendum bonding authority. It is important. I'm sorry, Peter.
Oh, yes, Peter.
Hi, Liz. 1.5 is a very conservative inflation rate when you're looking this far out. I wouldn't argue with you for the next 2 to 3 years, although even I think it might be low for even 3 years out. So this is actually a pretty conservative estimate of DSEB capability.
It is. It
Yes.
is indeed. Thank you for pointing that out. And
Thanks, Peter.
when we look at DSEBs, we try to be conservative because if you leverage bonds out there,
I
you
know.
want to make sure you've got the funds to cover it. So, good point. So, the thing you have to remember is if you issue non-referendum bonds and repay it over 20 years, that essentially locks you out of issuing non-referendum bonds for at least 20 years. You'll have each year that you pay down bonds, you get another year at the end of that 20 years. But if you go out for the maximum amortization 20 years, you will lose the flexibility for a number of years to issue additional working cash or life safety bonds as needed. But I think this is just a good metric to let you know what you could leverage without going to the voters. So option one is 15 million of limited bonds and 20 million of fund balance. And so if we take 20 million out of the education fund and transfer that to the capital projects fund, it takes your fund balance down to 78.6 million, or 106.8% of annual expenditures. So 20 million from fund balance complemented with 15 million of limited bonds, of course, only gives you 35 million. Okay, so again, that's why I apologize that your earlier discussion I didn't have additional options for you, but this is a $35 million total package, 20 million coming from fund balance and 15 million from limited bonds.
Excuse me. The 15 million, you were at 39 million, then you went to 15. That's just a conservative jump? there, or?
Well,
where do you-
39 million is the max that you could possibly get. The 15 million is simply an option to,
It could be 10, it could be
It
20,
could-
you pick 15 for this scenario.
exactly,
Correct.
exactly.
Liz, let me just make a comment on the 35, and you shouldn't be apologizing because that's what we asked you to do. My thinking on that was that when we looked at the cost options that we have up there, we're talking about a project that would start at the lowest end of the things we're recommending at a $35 million project to do a pool building on the garage site or on the baseball site now. And then what gets those up to 52 million is the repurposing of the existing pool spaces. Well, we wouldn't be repurposing them until the pool building itself was built and we were moved into. So I was thinking that's 2 or 3 years down the line. So we would, potentially need additional financing then if we were going to repurpose it. But it didn't make sense to try to figure out how to finance the whole 50 million up front, but also to be thinking, and that's why I asked you to give us the, per $5 million, what's the additional cost and tax impact at the end so that we can sort of estimate. So if we did 35 now and then another 15 in 3 years from now, we just have a ballpark of what that might look like.
Well, and to that point, Jeff, you can have a rational conversation once a final decision is made on your course of action of staging that cash flow even more tightly.
Correct.
And
Correct.
doing half of it this
Correct.
year and another half
And-
next year and so on and so forth.
And in addition to that, these projections are all very early projections at fairly high levels with appropriate contingencies built in. And if history is any guide, our construction costs have come in under our estimates at this stage, and if all goes well, we would be spending less, and we have much better control over it. So anyway, good, carry on. I just wanted to make that point.
Thanks for that color. That's very helpful. Page 9, again, this is the 15 million limited bonds. We're paying them off over 20 years with the idea that the pool and the construction of it is going to last for 20 years plus, most likely. And so then we're leaving in the green space room to issue more debt if needed, non-referendum bonds. So this option 1 does give you flexibility for additional debt. Paying it off over 20 years, we've got about a 6-cent tax rate increase, and on a $400,000 market value home, that's about $64, okay? If we go to the next page, option 2 is just the reverse, issuing 20 million of limited bonds and 15 million of fund balance. So in this case, we take 15 million out of the ed fund, transfer to capital projects, and we've got an ending fund balance of 83.6 million, or 113% of expenditures. Page 11 looks at the amortization of the 20 million limited bonds. So by going from 15 to 20 million, our annual debt service goes up to about, on average, 1.5 million. And the tax impact is 8 cents. So it's 2 cents more, or $85 on the $400,000 market value home. The next section is referendum options. Okay? So let's first look at the upcoming dates for referendum. The next date is April 14th of 2015, our consolidated election. Then we skip all the way till March of 2016. There is no November of 2015 election allowed for ballot questions. There is an election, but no ballot questions. So March 15th of 2016 is a general primary. Then we come to November 8th of 2016, the general election. The February 28th election, really, I would say ignore that because there's only the ability to get on a February referendum if you have some sort of local aldermanic race going on within Oak Park, and I don't believe you've ever had that happening. So I would just disregard the February, and then we go to April 4th of 2017. Okay, so options 3 and 4 are really almost identical to our non-referendum options. Option 3 is 15 million of referendum-approved bonds and 20 million of fund balance. Again, we've got the impact on the 2015 budget using 20 million of education fund balance. Then option 3, where we've got 15 million of referendum bonds. Now, the thing to know when you issue bonds pursuant to referendum, they're unlimited to rate or amount. They're separate and outside of your debt service extension base. So what that does is it leaves your entire 2.5, 2.6 million debt service extension base available to you for other capital projects or life safety bonds as needed. Okay, so the tax rate for 15 million is about $1,150,000, again 6 cents or $64 on the $400,000 market value home. Option 4 is 20 million referendum bonds and 15 million fund balance. Again, the same chart, taking your fund balance down to 83.6 million. And then option 4, the 20 million referendum bonds, again, an 8-cent increase, repaying them over 20 years, or $85 on the $400,000 market value home. So I think what this tells us is essentially that for every additional 5 million, whether referendum or non-referendum, it increases the tax rate about 2 cents or $21 additional dollars on that $400,000 home. So that's one metric you can use. It's important to recall, though, that on the non-referendum options, over 20 years, our maximum is just under 40 million. With a referendum, you can go up to the district's statutory debt limit with a referendum ask. You actually can put a ballot question on over that statutory limit. It's just you're going to be limited in how you issue the bonds. So you could issue them over 5 years. As the EAV grows, you pay off all old debt, you could access perhaps that additional amount. There are ways you can get exceptions from the debt limit. The most common way is legislation. There's probably 27 different school districts across the country that have gotten exceptions to debt limits, across our state, I'm sorry. Lots and lots of exceptions there. It just takes legislative support locally. The other way you can get accepted from the debt limit is to have 2/3 of the voters say yes. So that is always possible. Questions?
So the goal was just to give everybody a little grounding in what the financing is, and if we pay a portion of this over time, what the impact on the taxes are. Just thought that would be helpful as we think about deciding on an actual option to suggest. I also yeah. Any questions for Elizabeth? Let me make one comment while you think about whether you have it. Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
So the non-referendum cap is 4, or the 39, what's the referendum, the debt service cap?
Well, 6.9% of your EAV, which is the current statutory limit, is 129 million.
Thank you.
I'll just make a comment on the election dates, Jeff, and that is, and I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb and giving my opinion that you could probably scratch November 8th, 2016. Running a debt referendum in the general election is probably not a successful strategy. In April 4th, 2017, District 97 has a long planned referendum scheduled to be run at that time as well.
Correct. And I would also add that there are at least 3 reasons that we might do a referendum. One would be if we were issuing referendum bonds. One would be because we think it's a good idea to go to the voters and ask for permission to do this project, given its size and scope. And the third is that under the school code, if what we're building is not viewed as an improvement to the existing building, but is viewed as a new building, for instructional purposes, as this is because instructional swim is, PE is instructional, we're required under the school code to get permission whether or not we're asking for bond financing. I know there are some exceptions in the code that we could look at, but those three things. The last time at the meeting that the board decided to create this committee, the sense of the board was taken at that meeting, and although we did not vote, all 7 board members said that they were inclined to do a referendum. So I think that we should be thinking, given Peter's good advice on when a wise referendum time should be, that if we can make a decision, as we hope to by next week, that looking at a referendum to approve whatever project we decide, we recommend, if the board approves it, that looking at a referendum this coming April is the most sensible time. So that's part of the reasons it feels like we're on a very fast time frame here, because in terms of a practical time to do that referendum, to ask for that permission, it is also possible that the garage site attached at the second level looks more like an attachment to the building and an improvement of the building with a relative to the rest of the building square footage relatively small, that it might not be required under the school code. We'd have to think that through further, but just to raise some of the complications around this without going too far out on a limb about it. I just wanted to let everybody know where the thinking was on that. Joe?
Possible added complication. Would that suggest that the design team is not hired to proceed until the referendum, in other words, to start to develop the drawings and the engineering drawings, which would probably prevent us from getting in the ground in the summer? I'm just following that calendar, so we would lose another year?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Well, we gain a year instead of waiting for the following year or 3 years later.
Joe?
But that time frame is right.
Unless you identify the design team to go forward, right?
Right, incurring significant costs ahead of a referendum just doesn't feel like a good idea to me. So.
And significant was something that was brought up at that meeting, and the significance is, my memory is, it's $500,000 to $700,000
Right.
of
That's correct.
Right.
design work that would be taken on prior to a referendum. That was the question.
Half $500,000 to about $750,000, right?
Jeff,
Yes, thank you.
what is the drop dead date for board action in order to get the question on the ballot in April 15th?
The filing date for the ballot proposition is, I believe, January 18th. So the board needs to take action in advance of that. There may be a little bit of a period. Todd, do you remember the exact timing?
That's about right. It's that middle week of January. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of leeway here to get it done, but not a lot. And of course, we have to figure out what the referendum would say, and get it written and all that sort of stuff. So. Any other comments on thoughts on this? Questions for Liz?
No, nothing other than it leaves $20 million in non-referendum bonds for other things.
Other improvements, sure.
Right, right. So the one other thing I'll add is that in the work of the Finance Advisory Committee last year and in the conversations about this year's levy decision that is still underway, the FAC and the board has been using models that did allocate $20 million to capital. So we haven't made any commitments to that, but that is part of how the board has been thinking about it so far.
Yeah.
And any board members can feel free to object to my characterization if you want. I think I've got it right. So. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. It's also organized with nice charts and everything. What I would like to do now is to move to the process of determining which of the 11 options we will move forward for consideration at our next meeting as a potential final final recommendation. Thanks very much, Liz. Good night.
Thank you.
Yes, Rob.
I'd like to start, I'd like to suggest that we start by removing from the table all options that have no support and get that out of the way quickly.
I would like to I would prefer to simply go through from the top to the bottom, and if there's no support, it will become obvious as we get to each one. So,
Jeff, just for practicalities, will you be asking for a motion, a second, and a
Yes.
vote?
Yes,
On each of
exactly.
the items, starting at the top and working our way
Exactly.
down.
So what I'd like to do is start at the top, begin with 1A, and ask for a motion. I wrote down some words. You can tell me if you like these. For each option, it would the motion would be include option X among the options to be considered by the committee when it makes its final recommendation to the Board of Education. And so on each option, I will ask for somebody to make a motion and a second. If there's no motion or second, we will drop that option and move to the next one. If there is a motion and a second, we will then open it for discussion and ask for any further pros and cons before we vote. I'm going to try to limit those discussions to 5 or 10 minutes on any that need discussion, because I think we've vetted these quite a bit, and I don't think we're going to sway too many people at the last minute. Patrick, please.
I apologize for the interruption. I wanted to ask, as we're discussing the option 1C, Ralph had asked a couple of questions, and I mentioned that we had a diagram that could show the comparison of the two. Would you want us to show the long stretch versus the diagram that Ralph had issued in comparison? Is that helpful at this point?
The main question in my mind is, would it change the pros and cons or the estimated costs significantly?
Based on the way the costs have been prepared by Henry Brothers, the cost is based on the total affected area. So the total affected area wouldn't change. It's still the same, up to the south wall of the gym.
Uh-huh.
And then as far as the pros and cons, it's clarify what we talked about before. It's 2 more lanes of 25 yard length for PE is the benefit. The differential then is the deck widths that we had talked about before. But again,
Okay.
but the cost wouldn't change.
Okay, thank you. I think that is adequate for us to move forward.
So just a clarification, so are we limited to the number we can vote yes on, or we can vote yes on all 11?
You can vote yes on any option that you think needs to be considered in the finals, either because you want more debate or you want us to get more information together during the next week. But I really urge everybody to remember that we're trying to make a decision next week. And so the more we can narrow it, the better. But I don't think it makes sense to put a limit on it tonight.
Jeff?
Go ahead.
Okay, Chris.
Say you're voting for something to be moved off-site. Are we to assume that nothing, if it says move tennis off-site, are we to assume that tennis is just going to have to find stuff that's existing in the community to make it work, or that we'd put them off-site and either purchase something to build there or build something new? Like, what does that mean, pushing them off-site? Does that mean they're going to a park district? Like, just clarify that for me, please.
Since we do not have the answer on any of them, it means that will be an unknown. I mean, we may recommend.
You'll have to do more legwork.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I was talking about that, Chris. Just I'm taking 5 as an off-site option because I've noticed that as well. That everything's being pushed off-site with really no
No plan.
no plan. So we say that, and most respectfully, Joe, you say, pushing the swimming off-site is a non-choice. Well, because there's no decisions made yet about swimming off-site. There's no site, there's no anything. There's none of that for tennis. There's none of that for baseball. There's none of that for everything. So I won't get to it now, but I'm gonna move that we keep number 5 on the for discussion, that when we talk about moving something off-site, we also be serious about, when we're talking about whether it's baseball or tennis or the natatorium itself, that we get serious about that, because none of the questions for baseball off-site have been answered. None of the questions for tennis. Saying there's some empty courts along Harlem, that's hardly a solution for the people that play tennis. Saying that, hey, Lindbergh's there, we got some playing fields, that's no solution. And I know there's community support for baseball, tennis, swimming. I'm the only guy from River Forest, I think, on this committee. If that's true, if that's not true, please correct me, but I was listening.
I grew up there.
Okay, grew up there. Well, I mean, I know River Forest is dying for some of these facilities, and it's it's the other half of the high school's name.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
when I move for option 5 to be considered, I hope somebody will second it. Simply because when we talk off-site, I'm going to focus on the off-site portion of option 5.
Tom, I didn't want to move it, but I'll second it. Okay, it's,
Just one quick, do you have an idea, Jeff, on what will move forward based on, is there a percentage of votes that an option has to receive to move it forward as a serious option?
we're going to take a roll call vote on each of them, and a majority will move it forward. Ralph?
Is it necessary for the mover of the motion to go through all the words, or can you simply indicate the number of the choice with the words being what you read off of there?
Gail, is that okay? Yeah, we can just say the number of the choice unless you want to, and no, you can't change the motion. That's the motion. Say what the number is. Thank you. Okay, any other process questions before we start? Here we go at 9:30. Option 1A, would anybody like to make a motion to keep option 1A on the table?
Yes.
So moved by Joe. And is there a second? Hearing none, we will move on. Thank you, Joe. Option 1B, which is I guess I should at least say this, the east-west stretch pool in the southeast corner of the existing high school. Is there a motion for option 1B? This could be easier than we thought, but probably not. I'm just joking. Moving to option 1C, the north-south stretch pool in the southeast corner of the existing high school. Is there a motion for option number 1C?
There is.
Moved by Dr. Ralph Lee. And is there a second for motion for the motion on option 1C?
Second.
Okay. Having had a motion and a second, I open the floor for discussion of the option 1C east, north-south stretch pool in the southeast corner of the existing facility.
I would like to point out that this is the one option that satisfies most of the arguments that we've been talking about. Not all of them, but most of them. It seems to me that the biggest drawback is that $87 million, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that $87 million figure. From my point of view, it may well cost $87 million if one thing is true, and that is if the support structures that you have to tear out of there in order to build that pool so seriously endanger the rest of the building structure that it really costs $35 million to get around that. That's what I just said is not totally true. It wouldn't cost $35 million, because some of that $35 million is used for having to turn the corner slower in order to get into the alley. But I can't see that kind of thing being that expensive, but it may. At the other end of the spectrum, if you're lucky, the stuff that you have to tear out doesn't make everything come tumbling down. If that's the case, you're not trying to go in and out through a narrow slot. You simply remove that whole south wall and just drive the trucks in there, because the reason that's a north-south pool is simply because that is a single building structure. At one time, my understanding is that that was one building. Remove that one building, and if that assumption is correct, you've got a much less expensive proposition of renovating it. Obviously, the only way to tell whether that's true or not is to look more deeply into it. I think it's worth the time and trouble that's necessary to actually look into it to see whether that structure can support, well, to see whether or not you can do the job that needs to be done, meaning providing 16 lanes at a cost that we can afford. I'm assuming that 87 million is not a cost we can afford. Oh, I'm not convinced that we need that new structure, that new construction out there. There are lots of places in this building where we are using the kind of efficiency that we were using in the weight room, using a huge two-story room for a one-story purpose. A great deal of space would be saved by doing that. You also have a tall structure like that in the West Pool area that provides the opportunity for reclaiming space. I'm not convinced that we're that short on space once we start making use of space more efficiently. That's why I'd like to see us consider this in more detail. I'm done.
Jeff?
Put hands up for who wanted to talk. I got Tom, and then John, and then Peter.
Okay, yeah. My recollection of this option and the options associated with this part of the building where they were removed early because they were cost prohibitive and because of the disruption that would occur in trying to surgically repair or take a building apart during the course of a couple school years. I think while this exercise hasn't got into detailed costing, it's convinced me that it is cost prohibitive, and so that was one of the reasons why I'm glad we at least got to this point to look at it. But the disruptive piece has never changed, and so for both of those reasons, I'm opposed to continuing with this one.
Thank you. John?
I wanted to ask Patrick or Rob a question on this one, and that is does this option a longer period of construction than, say, putting something on the baseball field on Lake Street, a standalone? No. Okay, all right, thank you. And then the second point is that I agree with what Tom said. I think that this is this option or these options in this section do create the most disruptions for programs and facilities within the building. You would lose, for the duration of the construction, you would lose half of the current PE and athletic facilities. Again, with no foreseeable way to replace those on a temporary basis, all those indoor facilities for winter sports and winter PE, et cetera. So those are some concerns. I would also say that, to comment on Ralph's point about do we need the additional construction that this proposes, if you don't do that, then you will have lost facility space as well. So the one positive about this is that you don't lose any facility space on a permanent basis because of all the additions that you're going to do. So that's a positive of it. But if you take that out, then it becomes another negative in my opinion.
Peter?
I'll just comment that this is one of the options that I wanted to work. And I thought that the board had not considered seriously, which was a major reconstruction of the PE facility itself. But once I see the cost and the disruption to the program during the construction, which will be lengthy, probably 2 seasons, so you know what you do with PE for 2 years. And I'm not willing to make a bet that the estimator is wrong. I'm willing to go with the professional's judgment on construction cost.
Just a last comment.
Sure.
Similar to the others, but to spend a $35 million premium for this scheme and still not have, I thought the board pretty well established that the flexibility of the long course pool versus a stretch for that premium and the disruption, and still not to have the long course pool just makes it hard for me to support this one.
Thank you. Okay. Given all that, I would like to call the question, and we're going to do roll call votes on these. So, and there are 16 of us here tonight, so we'll take a couple moments.
Just to be clear, yes is in favor of the motion, keeping it alive. No is it's eliminated.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's correct. Yes is to keep it under consideration. No is to remove it from consideration.
You're saying we can't use a show of hands?
We're going to do a roll call vote.
Mr. Altenberg?
No.
Mr. Kowski?
No.
Mr. Connell?
No.
Mr. Cronin?
No.
Dr. Gevinson?
No.
Dr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
No.
Mr. Meister?
No.
Mr. Saltzman?
No.
Mr. Stelzer?
No.
Mr. Tracer?
No.
Ms. Young?
No.
Mr. Alderman?
No.
Ms. Roberts?
No.
Ms. Gaida?
No.
Mr. Weisglass?
No. Okay, we'll try to keep moving, and now we move to the parking garage. So we'll go to option 2A, which is the option to build the pool on the current parking garage site without replacing any parking within the facility. So I would like to ask for a motion for option 2A. Okay, hearing none, option 2A is now off the table, and I'll now entertain a motion for option. These words are going to start to come together here. Option 2B to take down the parking garage and build a pool building that includes 100 parking spaces at grade.
So moved.
Second.
Who got there first?
Who's second?
I'll go.
Let's give it to Paul. Yeah. Okay, any discussion of this option? Okay.
This is interesting to me only if we can cost out the second 100, so 200 spaces.
Okay, we will make a note that if this moves on to next week, that part of the information we'll try to gather is an estimate of what it would cost to add a second 100 spots. Tom?
I think the option should stay alive, because from what you just said, there's a possibility that this becomes an opportunity for maybe a non-referendum building or something like that. that,
Mhm.
and that may be an important possibility that should be considered.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to keep this option alive, one, because I think the parking problem is solvable. It's probably more solvable and more solvable than the field challenges. And I think as a community, we need to look at this investment as an investment in open space, not an investment in parking, because by doing this parking facility, we're not compromising current open space. And if it's my choice, I'd rather have kids running around on the open space than having cars parked there or buildings sitting there. So that's why I think it should be alive.
Thank you. Other comments, Joe? And then Ralph? Yeah.
Okay. In concept, this is my favorite option because it's probably least disruptive to the other spaces, including the green space, and because of the referendum question. But in truth, this is where the pool might be if we were starting with a clean slate. It's up against Lake Street, which allows for easier community access, without disruption to the neighbors, without disruption to the academic side of things. So I'm a big fan of trying to find how to efficiently accommodate as much parking as we can within the structure, given the sort of the geometry, but I'm a big fan of this advancing.
Okay, thank you. Ralph?
It seems to me that what we're talking about is having somewhere between 150 and 250 people, depending on how much parking space is built, walking an additional, I'd say on an average of 3.5 to 4 blocks each way, or 7 or 8 blocks per day. Every day, at least 180 days per year for the next 50 years. That might not be very much pain. That might not be very much pain in a single day, maybe not in a single year. Over a period of 50 years, that's quite a cost. I'm surprised that no groups of employees have had much to say about it. But I think we should be better employers than that.
Sounds like a lot of excellent wellness activity. And as an employer, we should be promoting that activity more than driving, but that's.
But I also think Dr. Sawyer, when he did his report, he expressed the concerns that the teachers and faculty were against it. I think it's back put out.
So I'd like Joyce and then Peter, please.
That's what I was just going to say that Chris just spoke to. I appreciate your concern, and I think it is legitimate, which is why I wanted a 2C per se to explore adding more parking. But Dr. Osoye did speak at our last meeting regarding all of the staff and faculty units that would be affected by this, and it is an important point to consider.
Peter?
Yeah, I spoke previously. I support the garage, supported it when it was being built. Originally, as a neighbor, it solved a tremendous number of problems being in the neighborhood. But I listened to Paul's presentation on parking, and he convinced me that this could be a shared solution. If you can fit the 100 spaces there, I think this is a viable solution. It puts staff really only on the, you'd have to talk to the village and parking commission about the current parking regulations, but a solution could be to just put staff on the east-west streets immediately north, leaving the north-south streets still open, and that's a tenable solution, I think, for the neighborhood, as opposed to just dumping all the cars out there. It is a bit of a shared burden, and I do believe ultimately there's only so much green space. I do hate to give up green space. So I could accept this option. It's not my preferred option.
Any other comments on the parking spot?
The biggest concern I have about the parking garage or diminishing the capacity of it is the people who come to the high school for events. That really resonated with me when we heard the parking study. That it's not just the teachers who use the space, but it's actually people who come here to see athletic events, and that affects our ability to host. people who come here to see their children and their grandchildren, and then also other groups that come here and use this facility. And so reducing the number of parking spaces, I think we really need to consider the comprehensive impact that it has on our community.
Steve?
I agree with those statements, and I'm going to vote to move it on to next week, just because I would like to see what some information on what it would cost to do 200 spaces, but I don't think 100 is nearly enough. And the parking garage that was built solved a problem successfully, and to dismantle it, we better have a solution that also doesn't create a problem.
Okay, I think,
So do we need to amend the motion to include the inclusion of the additional cost estimate and the completion of the fact-finding related to the parking availability in the area?
If
Or
that's a
do we
motion,
just
I
leave-
second it.
I don't think I need a motion to price out the second 100, I think.
So that's included.
I think in terms of additional information, I don't think there's any reason that we need a motion to that. So yeah, we will at least do that. So given that, Gail, please call the roll.
Dr. Gevinson?
Yes.
Dr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Meister?
Yes.
Mr. Saltzman?
Yes.
Mr. Stelzer?
Yes.
Mr. Tracer?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Eshelman?
Yes.
Mr. Kowski?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell? Or
Yes.
Mr. Connell? Mr. Cronin?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Gaida?
Yes.
And Mr. Weisglass?
Yes. Okay, so we have at least one to talk about next week, so. Let's try to keep moving, hopefully, well, we'll see how much discussion we need, but let's just keep it moving. The next option is option 3A, which is the option to build a new pool building on the current baseball field and to move the baseball field off-site. Would anybody like to make a motion to keep this option 3A under consideration?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second, and any discussion, please?
I made that motion with the intent of focusing our efforts on that next leg of research that needs to be done. I'm not convinced there is a solution here, but I think you need to have further conversations with Oak Park Youth Baseball, with Park District, with other community users, and see if there is a scheduling accommodation that can be worked out.
Okay. Thank you. Other thoughts on this?
I don't think there's any intention of purchasing a facility to put a baseball field in, and I just would like to go on record saying that I think we're trying to add a baseball field in a community that doesn't have any space for baseball fields, so.
I will add my thoughts on this one, which is that, Chris, you probably know much more than I do about that, but having just heard that statement for the first time tonight, I need more research on that question, deeper understanding of what the community can and can't have. I actually think that there is no immediate plan to try to to buy a permanent facility. But I do think that if we do move it off-site and can accommodate it, that it's still possible in the long term that you could acquire property over some period of time. So it still feels like an option that I want to think through, so I'm going to support it. I just trying to keep this facilitator and member separate. I just want to be clear that's just my personal position on this. Any other comment? Kathy?
I would agree with this. Mr. Cronin said earlier, 3, A, B, C, D, and 5, and even to some extent 2B are all the same to me. something's going off-site and we don't know where it's going. So,
Not the 3D.
right, you're right,
Right.
not the stadium, good point. So that notwithstanding, a week's tough to know what's gonna go off-site. We almost, I think we have to look at them all. And we have to have a little bit better plan to figure out how it's going to work out.
I would like to support that. I mean, they really are interconnected. You know, the idea that baseball is going off-site, tennis is going off-site, or in option 5 would be the swimming facility itself would go off-site. You know, it seems to me that those are all three the same question. There's a recognition that we're landlocked, there's not enough facility here, and therefore, you know, something's got to move. And rather than have it be a zero-sum game, I like Chris's recognition, and I feel this, that whatever parent you are or whatever sport you love, you know, we just need more space, and maybe there should be a recognition. And you know, we got rid of 140 million. We got some cash, right? So I mean, if we're talking about the kind of investment, and I'm joking, of course.
Of course, I understand. Yeah, that's that fuzzy math.
I'm joking, but it was easy for us. Not easy, but we got rid of one B, A, B, and C pretty quickly, and I think because of the cost. Now we're talking about something more realistic. But there needs to be, most respectfully, more rigor to when we say tennis offsite, what do we mean? When we say baseball offsite, what do we mean? And again, for option 5, I think is part of that. When we say swimming goes offsite, what do we mean? So I would put them all in the same group and vote yes.
And I would second that motion.
You were the guy who kept telling me to do one at a time.
Well, now we've combined them.
I still have 5 as a different animal because that is seeking also partners, not just land, unless we're going to fund a competition
good with
on our
3A
own
and
on
C.
top
I
of
would
renovation for inspection.
can we? Right. I would ask for.
Keep an unbundled for that.
Right. I would ask for a motion to combine 3A, B, and C for this purpose. Then, because those all have the building in the same spot. And then trying to solve the taking a sport off campus problem.
I move combining 3A, B, and C.
Okay, so Peter has moved that and Joe has seconded that. I'll start the discussion just by saying that I'm not sure how we're going to answer that question. So it will be in time to make a decision that allows us to move forward with the referendum schedule if we go that way. If we're building on that site, we clearly have to in that time. So that just is a concern of mine. But having said that, I will support the motion. So. Any other thoughts from anybody? Adam, please.
I think certainly, you know, it seems like a heavy lift to get all of the specifics in each scenario in place, but I do think it's achievable within the span of a week to at least get a sense, particularly with respect to baseball at Lindbergh, of how feasible it is to shuffle the schedule around to really make this happen. That seems to me like it could be accomplished with a few phone calls and and a memorandum.
Chris?
I would also like to point out that I think that these 3A, 3B, 3C, we are talking about partnerships and other stakeholders, not just the Oak Park Park District, but possibly Fenwick, possibly the tennis club on Harlem Avenue, possibly District 90, and possibly Park District facilities in River Forest. I mean, and even Cook County Forest Preserve District. There are a lot of potential partners that I think probably are worth airing out, rather than just simply a conversation between 200 and in the Park District in Oak Park.
So I have a question then. In all 3 of these options, we're building the building on the same site, and it cost the same amount. How should we think about the sequencing of answering those questions, right? Could we decide that that's the preferred site and move forward with putting it on a referendum while we are still working to answer the question of which sport would go off-site and where it would go with what partners? Is that a way to perhaps?
I think the
move
motion
forward?
is to combine the three and to vote on it. And in my
I-
personal opinion, based on 10 o'clock at night.
I agree. So the question I asked is more of a question for next week, but that's part of the question. Kathy, did you have a comment before we go?
I just, from the way I'm looking at these drawings, it just looks like a slide rule where that orange block is moving not on this one, but, so I don't even know that it matters if we have the exact same cost estimates, whether it's on the baseball field, softball field, or the tennis. It's
In
still
answer to my question, yeah,
The
okay.
question's still 52.2 million.
Okay, right. Joe, and then I think we're gonna call this question.
I guess to your first point, the solution, the total solution cost is not the same, but the building cost is the same.
Correct.
Yes.
That's right, depending upon where we land.
And just a quick thing with the, I don't know what the cost Dr. Say said was, but they're completing Lindbergh Park right now, so we can't really assume that it's only gonna cost $1.2 million to put a baseball field at a place that they just spent, how much money? $1.2 million to build, and now we're gonna go tear it up? Did they just give that for free? I don't understand how that's gonna work.
Okay.
We did more than just baseball field.
I don't,
Baseball
but,
field,
yeah.
200.
Okay, so the motion on the table is the combined, keeping 3A, B, and C under consideration for next week. And Gail, please call the roll on that question.
Dr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Ledbetter?
No.
Mr. Meister?
Yes.
Mr. Saltzman?
Yes.
Mr. Stelzer?
Yes.
Mr. Pasek?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Altenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Ashelman?
Yes.
Mr. Kowski?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Cronin?
Yes.
Dr. Gevinson?
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Gaida?
Yes.
And Mr. Weisglass?
Yes. And I would point out that the difficulty of this work is represented in the emotional content of the various yeses. It's really, and the no's, in fact. So just acknowledge that this is difficult work. Next option is option 3D, and I ask, and that is the option to build, we've said on the baseball field, but we should probably say on the west field because it's actually a little bit north of, maybe it's in the baseball outfield currently, but building on the west field and moving baseball into the stadium. And do we have a motion for option 3D?
So moved.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
And any discussion?
Just when we went on that break, I was talking to the architects, and on the diagram, it showed a dugout on the Scoville side of that. And when we were talking during the break, it can't really be a dugout because that's in the end zone, so it couldn't be anything. It'd have to be something temporary because there's only, I don't know how many feet it was from the back of the end zone to the fence, just a couple feet, maybe like 3 feet. So, okay, but the dugout would be into the end zone, so it couldn't be a permanent structure, correct? The dugout? Okay, just because on the diagram, it looks like it's
Do you
off the
have- do you
field,
have-
but it's not.
Do you have permanent dugout structures now?
Yes.
I don't want to
Peter,
speak for
then Tom, then Steve.
I don't want to speak for Mr. Stelzer, but I'm going to echo his comment, which was I heard the scheduling just did not work in that configuration.
Yeah, I guess I never want to say never or say anything's impossible, but it would be extremely, extremely difficult to be able to organize schedules for practices and games during the spring season based upon the field alignment of the proposed soccer lacrosse field being overlaid into the softball fields.
Tom?
I would urge to oppose this simply because it just really is the worst part of a zero-sum game here, and we're talking about building a new facility, and yet a program is being squished into a facility that the experts have said just really doesn't seem to work in any sense that the kids are playing now, and it just the option that we had before about baseball off-site or tennis off-site and looking in good faith for something really is a very adequate solution seems to be a much smarter and better vote than 3D, most respectfully.
Steve?
I think we need to look into the utilization question. We used to, I don't know if we still do actually, release athletes ninth or the last period of the day to certainly participate in games, but even practice. But the fields over that Ridgeland Common just renovated could be used until 4:30 or 5 o'clock if kids are getting out and onto the fields at 2:15 or something. That's a possible utilization. It strikes me possibility. I would like to look at those schedules. I'd like to see what Tom asked for earlier, which was how possible is it? How difficult is it actually to schedule it? I think it's too early to close it down as an option. I think that the question of permanent dugouts is, we don't know that you can't build permanent dugouts. It depends on where you put the field. You can move the field. You can move the dugouts. There's so much more space when you put that outfield there that you capture. You can move the football field over.
If we can't move the mall and we can't move Scoble, I don't, there's 300 feet between, or 300 and
Well,
what
then it's a
feet.
temporary
I just
dugout.
asked, I mean, but we can't do anything with the mall, then I don't know how much wider you could go.
Okay.
Just one last thing, I'm sorry,
Yes, John.
because I apologize, because Steve brought this up for the second time, which was we might be able to move the football field. We cannot move the football field without moving the light standards. Okay, and that's a huge, huge issue. Okay, so the football field as it is right now, I don't see any way, shape, or form that could be moved.
And the lights would,
Don't touch the lights.
hey, and the lights would be in play, am I not right, John? The lights would be in play, in the outfield, or they'd be between shortstop and left field of the baseball field.
Kathy?
Jeff, I'd just like to say, of course, this is about the students, but so much of what we're saying with the strategic plan is to bring the community in, bring the parents in, bring the friends in. And what worries me the most about that diagram was just a limited ability to put stands, to put bleachers, removing bleachers, no way to get to see the soccer game. It just
Lost
seemed-
spectator space.
Yeah, it seemed like you weren't gonna get spectators in there.
Okay. And I will add that my concerns with it are two. One is the putting the lacrosse and softball in the, lacrosse and soccer in the outfield of the softball fields creates so much overlap and difficulty. And the building in this case is further north than in the other cases. And when I think if we're going to use the baseball field as the spot for the building, I really, the appeal of it for me is to create more of a closed stadium feel. To put it up, nestled as close as possible to the football field, build in permanent bleachers, make it feel more like an enclosed space, and leave as much open green space as possible. If we have to move it 100 or 200 feet north, it feels like it's a little bit marooned in the middle of that open space and cuts it up in ways that aesthetically don't feel very pleasing to me. So those are my concerns about it. And with that, I would like to call the question.
Dr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Ledbetter?
No.
Mr. Meister?
No.
Mr. Saltzman?
No.
Mr. Stelzer?
No.
Mr. Tracek?
No.
Ms. Young?
No.
Mr. Altenberg?
No.
Mr. Eschelman?
No.
Mr. Kosky?
No.
Mr. Connell?
No.
Mr. Cronin?
No.
Dr. Gevinson?
I have to say yes.
Ms. Roberts?
No.
Ms. Gaida?
No.
And Mr. Weisglass?
No. Moving along to the Lake Street Field, and thanking everybody for their perseverance. Would anyone like to make a motion to build the new pool facility on the Lake Street Athletic Field site, option number 4. Hearing none, we'll move on to option number 5, which is to renovate the current pools for PE swimming use and to pursue an off-campus competition pool. And I would like to ask for a motion to keep option number 5 under consideration, moved by Tom and seconded by Kathy, and I'll open it for discussion. Tom Cronin, sorry.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I think this should be on there, and really, I see it, and I understand why finding partners for building a, competition-sized pool may be more difficult than finding partners in the community for tennis courts or for a baseball field. But and I like the parking thing too. I mean, but if we're going to be talking about looking for off-site location, it seems to me that the analysis is really the same as for a tennis facility as it would be for a baseball facility. I see option 5 as really investigating the off-site options. And so I'm kind of expanding a little bit what you've listed here, because I'm kind of including what I see as some of the concerns from the baseball folks and tennis folks, is that we really investigate or spend some time, and I know a week is a heavy lift, I think, Adam, is what you said, truly a heavy lift. And it becomes even heavier when you're talking about a swimming pool facility. But I think there should be some attempt to investigate whether it's tennis, baseball, or in this case, option 5, the swimming facility, that we really look to see if there's a community play or a community location where we can do it. So there's truly no loss of open space. We're adding to the facility, we're adding to it, and with the idea that the existing spaces are reused and repurposed.
Okay. Other comments?
I guess I'll add a little bit. The time, I think, for the off-campus competition pool left us in what was called the dream scheme for Richland Commons, when Richland Commons was looking at a new building on the west end of that site that included 2 tanks, one which could be the competition pool, another more leisure and recreational pool. That was voted down soundly. That was the time, that was the moment, that was the site, that was the place that could leverage the parking. That was the dream scheme for many reasons. Wrong time, wrong boards, but it failed. But it had partners. The Y was there, the Park District was there, the high school was not ready at that time, and the voters weren't ready at that time. So I think that was the best time for the scheme to live, and I think we lost our moment. Unknown site, unknown partners means that goes off into many other referendum years. In the meantime, we'll have to lose lanes for instruction when we do renovate the pools to make them legal. At the time when, by John Stelzer's numbers, we've got an extra almost 500 athletes coming in with our increased enrollment. So we're losing capacity to even deal with our instructional capacity in that time, or instructional opportunities. So for that reason, for all those reasons, I'll vote no on this one.
Adam.
I think you make very good points, Joe, and I think as it's been characterized to me by other folks whose opinions I respect, I think the analysis that the train sort of left the station with the Park District is probably right, and I was right with you up until the point that you opened your mouth, because there is another municipality associated with this high school, and there are other folks who might take an interest to this if we reached out. And I realize that opens up another can of worms and a lot of other contingencies that could create more work for all of us. But at the same time, anecdotally, and this is not a comprehensive poll I've taken or anything, when I talk to people in the community about this, option 5 seems to resemble what most people think would be the most sensible way to proceed with the community's tax dollars. what we can to improve the existing facility to meet the bare minimum, and I realize it's not the optimum situation. And at the same time, try to find a way that we can collaborate with another taxing body or a partner to spread the benefit of this kind of investment out over the larger community. So I think this probably does, at the risk of creating more work for everybody, probably does need to be discussed. I think that's the most responsible way to go.
Chris?
I'd just like to point out that I don't think that we're absolutely limited by next week's meeting. The drop dead is January the 18th, and yes, there is bond lawyer drafting, et cetera, but I think it's far more important to build consensus that can be the first step in a conversation with the two communities about what is the right choice, and building the consensus not just among this group but among the voters in the two communities. That's far more important, and if we bump up against the January 18th deadline, that might be worth it in order to air out some of these options and work through some of the details.
Thank you. Peter?
I will agree with all of Joe's comments. The dream moment has passed, but I do think in the context of loss of green space, you have to still have these conversations even if they don't come to fruition, because you could put a building on an unused spot. Maybe it's Foley Rice, maybe it's some other spot, and you don't eat up green space. That would be the best solution, even though we recognize that it's a minimal PE solution. I think Mr. Stelzer said he could make do with the increased population and pools with one lane less, but it's probably not going to be the ideal solution from a PE perspective, but maybe is the best solution from that community pool perspective. I just wish that we'd done it 5 years ago.
Don't look at me.
It wasn't your board.
We had money then.
It wasn't your board.
It wasn't me. We had money then.
I had
Somebody else
not
did.
yet even thought about running for the board, and I bumped into Paul Eshelman at a 5K race and raised the question with him 5 years ago, and he was up for the conversation. Mary?
Two things. One, going back to Joe's comments, I feel like Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football. That we're keying up for this, we're going to get partners, community's going to be behind us, and we get to the moment of truth, and there's nothing. And then the second thing I want to caution us about is 3A, B, and C are wholly different options than 5. 3A, B, and C recognize that there are facilities in place in both communities, already built. There's tennis courts in both communities. There's softball fields in both communities. There's baseball fields in both communities. Although I take exception with what Chris has said with respect to men's varsity baseball. But to get our two communities together with partners to build a entirely new facility for competition swimming and other like synchronized swimming as well and water polo, the community, I just have a hard time believing that that's something that our communities are going to sink their teeth into, because it is creating something brand new as opposed to drawing on what we have. So I caution us against going with this option.
John, and then Chris. Anybody else want to get in? Anybody else? All right, okay. And then Ralph, and then we'll call the question.
Well, I'm a little, I agree with Joe that 3, 5, whatever years ago would have been the best time to try to partner with people. But please understand that the YMCA and Top Swim Program and the Oak Park Park District are currently utilizing our pool and would currently want to use it more. Those are facts, okay? So if we built a pool I can't see any way around it that those current partners wouldn't want to continue to partner with us. So I'm confused as to what the concern is about garnering consensus from our partners, because they already want more time in our current pools now. So,
Okay, I just want to remind us as we wrap up that the decision we need to make right now is whether to keep this on the table for another week's conversation. We don't have to make the decision tonight. So Chris and then Ralph, and then we'll call the question.
I'm just concerned that in the 3 previous ones where somebody's getting displaced. But in those scenarios, we don't have to worry about it. We literally can build, pool will get built here, this team's displaced, and we don't have to worry about it. Okay, that's gonna be somebody else's problem. That's either gonna be Josh Stelzer's problem of figuring out where these teams are gonna play. But this scenario is a team's getting displaced, swimming, but we do have to worry about where they're going. And that's what I'm concerned about, that we'll vote for one team to be displaced and have to be concerned about where they're going. Yet in the 3 other ones, whether it's softball, baseball, or tennis, we can vote for them to be displaced and we don't have to come up with a solution for where they're going to play.
I think the point is well taken. I would say that in my mind, we've always had to figure out what the solution is.
I'm not in love with this, this option, but I'd still like to give Lucy one more week. So I'm in favor of it for the moment.
Okay. I would like to call the question, please.
Mr. Cronin?
Yes.
Dr. Gevinson?
Yes.
Dr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Ledbetter?
Yes.
Mr. Meister?
Yes.
Mr. Saltzman?
Yes.
Mr. Stelzer?
yes.
Mr. Krasek?
Yes.
Ms. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Altenberg?
Yes.
Mr. Eshelman?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Mr. Connell?
What pad?
How do you take that?
Ms. Roberts?
No.
Ida?
Yes.
And Mr.
Just wanted this for everybody else.
Yes. Ratified that there were no unanimous decisions tonight. That's good. I'm going to, I don't remember what else is on the agenda, but I think we should move to public comment and not try to talk about what additional questions. A lot of good stuff has come up. We will figure out how to proceed. We will plan to meet back here a week from tonight, same time. When I meet with Todd and Steve Asoya tomorrow, we will talk about the question of whether we should try to poll the committee about additional meetings if necessary. So we'll come up with a plan about that. We don't have to talk about it tonight. And with that, I would ask if anybody signed up for public comment.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan has.
Thank you, and please, your name and address, and then your comments.
Sure. My name is Bill Sullivan, and I reside at 825 Home Avenue in Oak Park. I am the immediate past president of Oak Park Youth Baseball Softball and a current taxpayer. First and foremost, I want to thank the committee for their patience, their time, dedication to these causes. I understand this is not easy. We've covered a lot of ground tonight, or rather I should say you have. And there are so many things I'd like to speak to, but I'm going to try to do it quickly because I don't want to go over 3 minutes for so many reasons. But first of all, at the September meeting of the whole board meeting, when the parking study was presented, we learned that the 300-car parking garage that you currently have on property is consistently using 285 parking spots during the day. That's an important factor. It also revealed that the Village of Oak Park was amenable to relaxing some of the parking standards on the surface streets in the immediate area. Furthermore, there were more than 300 parking spots available on a consistent basis during the day at the Avenue District parking garage. I would submit to you that a combination of 100 parking spots in the new building on the site of the parking deck, the relaxed standards on street, and a shuttle bus system from the Avenue parking garage, which would be far more economical than several of the other options, could together become the biggest solution, the best solution for your parking needs. Now, to this idea of building an auditorium on any portion of the Westfield sites. Obviously, I have an issue with that, being a baseball and softball advocate. I should also mention to you that I'm a golf advocate and a cross-country advocate and a water polo advocate and many other advocates. And there is precedence that many of your teams are already practicing, training independently or as a team, and playing off campus. Cross-country, golf, even softball and baseball players are training at facilities individually during the season and off season on their own dime at other facilities. So you can't sit here and pick winners and losers about what program gets to stay on campus and what doesn't. And that's essentially what we're doing here. The problem with my impression of the board as a whole when we first spoke in August was that they didn't seem to understand that this is essentially a water balloon. And when you're pressing down on one place, you need an expansion in another. So if you displace varsity baseball and build an auditorium on the varsity baseball field, and they somehow work out how to go to Lindbergh, you've just pushed JV and freshman baseball elsewhere. Currently don't know where that's going to be because the other diamonds in town aren't going to accommodate it. Maybe, but probably not in River Forest either. If you build an auditorium on the softball fields, you're not displacing just varsity or just JV, but there's 3 levels that are being displaced there as well. Oak Park Youth Baseball Softball currently
Bill,
leases.
can I ask you to turn around?
I'm
Right through.
very
Yeah,
close
thank
here. Currently leases those fields from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. in the spring for practice as well as games. You move softball off field, you're going to consume space that's currently being leased by Oak Park Youth Baseball Softball or Pony or River Forest Youth Baseball Softball. The problem is moving these sports off is going to hurt your feeder programs for years to come. I'm out of time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else signed up? Yeah.
No one else signed up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if anybody else would like to make comment, please come on up.
Tony Nowak, 825 North Kyler. I'm a member of Oak Park Youth Baseball Softball as well. Quite honestly, I've got kids who play every sport, and my biggest concern is, and the thing I don't hear, and I implore particularly the community members on the subcommittee here to consider, is one of the big failures of the original impact study was not recognizing the impact to outdoor youth sports and activities. And Bill hit on the surface of it, but there's so much more to it, that it's not just where you're going to put that sports team from the high school, but who are you moving out of those places. And it was a bit disappointing to hear from Mr. Weissglass, you need to find out a lot more about that, because for the last several months we've had AYSO, we've had EDGE, we've had Oak Park Youth Baseball Softball, we've had Windmills, we've had every youth sport and outdoor activity in this community coming to these meetings and explaining to you the impact of it. And frankly, it was very disappointing in the superintendent's comments not to hear that wasn't part of the discussion with the Park District. I wish each of you could spend 5 minutes in one of the planning meetings on trying to get field space in this village. It's unbelievable. So I really just implore, particularly community members, to keep in mind the impact of taking away that green space, not just about a particular sport, not just about the high school, but what it does to the community as a whole, to the kids and the places they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to make comment tonight? I just want to add one piece, and I'm sorry, I meant to say this earlier, Bill, and you would have heard it before your comment, so that the committee did receive a letter this week from the president of the Hemingway Business District Association, if I have that word right, which reminded us of information that we actually had also received from the village about the usage of the Avenue Garage and the parking study that was done in one day in September did see open spaces, but the actual number of permits issued in that are much higher, and the usage during the winter time and holiday shopping time are much higher. So the availability of the Avenue Garage itself is much lower than might have been imagined when we first heard that study, because I had the same initial impression. And that on top of the strong concerns about faculty and staff about the distance and the daily schlep, whether it's shuttle services or other. Which doesn't preclude a parking option. It's just that the Avenue Garage itself is less attractive than we had originally thought. So just want to make sure that was on the record. And with that, I will not ask for final comments. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much, everybody. This was really a great meeting.